Hey. Takes a long time to get around the table. It's got a lot of barriers in the way. I've been too sick to do any games recently. Not too sick to play, but too sick to record, especially since I'm planning on doing you can hear my voice wouldn't hold up for, a 40-minute rules explanation or anything like that. But I'm planning on doing a review copy of something, so I just haven't been playing, and instead I ran away and played video games. But what I'm thinking about here is just watching some Jon Stewart, him sitting there talking to Nancy Pelosi on Thursday or whatever. And in the after interview stuff that goes on the web, it struck me that we need the single thing that would help the most, maybe getting rid of the Citizens United thing would be a great idea. But, there is an argument there that control of the media, etc., is a form of speech. And I can see the argument. I think in order to have true free speech to everyone, if you don't equate speech with money, you'd have to say, well, everyone should have access to whatever outlets they want. Now, in a sense, if the internet's made free and public and kept that way, but the net neutrality kind of failed, and it's never really going to be, the fact that I can put out this broadcast is great and everything, just like I could stand outside handing out leaflets, but that still doesn't give me the reach that a network news or cable news show would, or that someone who controls a big site would have. So, in some sense, I have the ability to speak out, but I don't have the power of money that campaigns do to, for example, force it down everyone's throat. You want to watch anything that you might like during election season. Well, you're going to hear my ads, because I've got $50 million to spend on my Senate campaign or whatever. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Certainly, I don't think our founders thought about, we should prevent newspapers with good circulation from being able to make political statements of any kind. And that's just alien, and in a sense, that's the same kind of situation that we have. Now, the thing that I think wouldn't violate anything, in fact, it would return to our founding principles, would be to make a limit on the size of laws. And I don't know, 10 pages, 20 pages, 100, I don't care, but some reasonable limit. So here's why. When laws get passed, and this was talking about the Dodd-Frank, which got bloated from 2 pages to quite a large bill. When I think, though, about Obamacare with its 900 pages, and you'll find out what's in it once you vote for it, once it passes. This is not deliberative legislation, okay? This is not what the founders at all expected. And in fact, the number of laws that each Congress has passed has been going steadily down. That's why they make this big deal about, this is the least laws ever. Yeah, but if you look, even in the Bush era, when there was the W era, even when there was some agreement because of the 9/11 and the wars and everything early on, there still weren't that many laws. If you look back, a lot of laws got passed at one point. But those laws were small. Nowadays, you have these huge omnibus bills that come through, and they get, hundreds of amendments. Now, granted, Reid has been trying to prevent amendments in the Senate, but that's more of a tactical move to squelch the Republicans there than any real understanding that, a law should not be burdened down with all these special cases hanging off of it, all these riders. I mean, if I'm making a law on motorcycle safety, there shouldn't be an abortion rule in it, as there was in one state. Very, very simple. Keep it to a reasonable size. Anything that can't be expressed in a certain number of words, essentially, legally binding, etc., just shouldn't be a law, right? Okay. And that would put us in this position where people would have to make clearly stated, simple laws. They couldn't make all these exceptions and exemptions. You want a special law for, my poodle daycare center is going to get a federal grant? You don't put it in this big bill. What you do is you make a special bill for this thing. And obviously, nobody's going to stick with that. They're all going to say, wow, that doesn't make sense. That's not what the government should be doing. But as it is, the government is doing these big Frankenstein monsters and sending them out. And, nobody knows everything that's in them. But people know, I know the main force of some of this, and I got my little piece in, my little piece of pork, or my little, proviso that's important or whatever. And it's just, it's no longer the kind of thinking and deliberative process that we, the people, kind of deserve. And that would be a lot more reasonable for the legislature. They could actually debate the issue rather than put on shows, perhaps, because the issue would be simple enough that everybody could understand which side they're actually on, instead of trying to dig up, but somewhere in here there's this pork, and then there's this thing that sounds really restrictive. Make the laws really, really simple. And of course, since we've evolved over the last 120 years or so into making it really, really complex, like a lot of things, we're addicted to the complexity. So we need something very, very dramatic to drive us back to where things once were. And the only thing I can think of there is a constitutional amendment. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen, but it, I think, would go a long way in a very clean fashion, as opposed to trying to figure out how to determine what access to money counts as speech, essentially. If I own a newspaper, can I bolster my candidates in my editorial without that affecting their advertising funding, as it were? If I've got, a news show, a news program that always supports one side of the candidacy and not the other. I mean, people, there's just a very simple principle there that campaign finance kind of got in the way of. But then again, the next step is, well, is it really that bad to just offer people cash for their votes? I mean, that's a form of speech too, right? I'm giving you some speech. Here's my speech. Here's $20 of speech. Now you have $20 of speech that you can use. So there's trouble on both sides with that. But I think that by simplifying the laws and making it so clear that they can't be easily obfuscated, that people know what they're voting on, and that they actually have to vote on a kind of per-issue basis, would destroy this corrupt bureaucratic system that goes around crafting our laws. I don't want to just say, no amendments, because honestly, to some extent, deal-making and cutting is a part of democracy. So, if you couldn't package some things together, at least in big deals, you wouldn't have anything. But I'll tell you, the tax code, it would be tiny if it had to be just at 100 pages. It would be really, really simple. You wouldn't have all these exemptions that exist, all these loopholes that have been crafted for lawyers. Tort reform, a lot of that is a matter of simplification. Just so much of government has become a burden because it's complex. The more simple it becomes, as long as it remains kind of democratic and reasonable, and I don't see how simplicity would actually interfere with that at all. I think it would help it. The better it is. The better on everyone. The better on the lawmakers because they can think about the issues at play instead of just being told that they have to vote on something. It becomes much simpler because they won't be able to be each given their individual little bonus for it, right? You might distribute, hey, each state will get this much money for road work, and it will be supervised by this committee, which makes its own, or by this organization, which makes its own rules for how to supervise under these. But you could keep that to a fairly small size. You wouldn't have to have thousands and thousands of pages in these laws, to the extent where no one's absolutely sure what they just passed, and it takes a long time for people to figure out how to game the law, and then you have to revisit it and try to deal with the interests that have figured out how to game it and repeal it. Anyway, that's just my sick 2 cents coming in there, right?